Welcome to the Healing My Parts podcast, a podcast dedicated to educating and raising awareness about dissociative identity disorder, also known as DID. We are your hosts, the system behind Healing My Parts, which also includes parts that function as a therapist and leader in a mental health niche space. We'll be sharing tips and tools that have helped us and many others, while also sharing insights from our own journey of living with the condition. We'll also be hosting guests for conversations to help educate, dispel myths, and most especially help those living with dissociative identities and professionals who treat the condition. Thank you so much for tuning in. And now, let's get healing. Before we begin, I want to offer a gentle heads up about today's episode. This conversation goes deep into topics like organized abuse, cult trauma, and dissociation. It's thoughtful, it's hopeful, and it's also heavy. If you're listening as a survivor, a clinician, or someone who knows this material lands in your body, you're invited to go at your own pace, take breaks, pause if you need to, and if today isn't the right day, it's okay to come back to this when you're in a steadier place. We've linked resources in the show notes, and as always, take really good care of yourselves as you listen. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to be able to introduce you to Cheryl Rainfield, who we've been getting to know over the last few weeks and really enjoying them and their system. And before we kick it off, rather than us introducing this phenomenal system, I'm going to say welcome, Cheryl, and all of you, and ask if you might let the listeners know what you would most like them to know about you all.
Thank you. And we've so been enjoying getting to know you too. And I have to just say this first. I love your podcast. I love how you bring in compassion and warmth with really grounded information. I love that.
Oh, thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Team effort in here.
Yeah, for us too. So, we are a non-binary lesbian author. We write for teens, but adults read our books too. We are a cult torture survivor with resulting dissociative identity, and we have both self-created dissociative identity, and which we absolutely had to do to survive the torture, and we have cult-created folks inside, where they forced that to happen, and we are polyfragmented.
There's a lot to unpack there for
There
folks,
is.
which I think will be really helpful. One thing that I would love to just dive into at the onset, because I feel like there are people who have questions about it, is you will use the word torture to describe your experience.
Yes.
And it's a word I think a lot of survivors are afraid to claim. And I also think it's a word that people run away from or try to shut down.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how you got both internal permission to use it and also just your thoughts around people's rejection of the term.
We decided to start using the term cult torture because we had been using the term ritual abuse for years. And when we would talk about it, people would still not understand anything about what we'd been through. Or the terms organized abuse or ritual abuse, it's not even touching on the incredibly organized, deliberate torture, trafficking, mind control, and murder that happens. And if we're going to change anything and help survivors, we need to know what actually happens. And so I thought the word cult, because it's cult that it happens in, it's very organized, and torture together would help people understand more from the beginning. And for us, it's always been really important to talk about the trauma for other survivors to bring healing, but also for ourselves. It's a way to break silence and bring healing and take back our own power. But it did take me years to come to that because I was just using the words that the whole community was using. But I think we are watering it down when we do that. I think we're doing that for other people's comfort. And I want change to happen. I want more and more survivors to get safe. But how do we get more and more survivors to get safe if we don't have people who could hear us and believe us and actually support us? So I think it helps to talk about it in a way that will help people understand from the beginning.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So many survivors of cult abuse are just silenced, invalidated, and they're told that their memories are made up,
Yes.
Yes. Or, gee, maybe you had a bad dream. That's not real. What would you want to say to them directly?
They can believe and trust the memories that folks inside are telling them. That, like, say it's the part who's fronting, who's like an everyday part. Like, I didn't know what the body and the self and everyone inside was going through, but the folks inside me sure did because they were living through it. You can trust the memories. And we don't make up such extreme torture and trauma or all the effects of it. Like, if you are living with dissociative identity, you know that you went through extreme ongoing childhood trauma because there's no need for that otherwise, for that coping mechanism. And then there's the like the CPTSD and the depression and the anxiety, and a lot of us also have suicidal ideation or forms of self-harm that we've done. You don't There are such easy ways to get attention in this world that are not this, right? You don't mess up your entire life to get attention. And it is so hard, the pain that we go through and all the trauma, all the effects of the trauma. So you can believe yourself. And if other people are invalidating it, they may not feel mm, comfortable with the level of trauma and torture and organized torture that there is that we go through. So it is challenging their worldview. They don't want to believe that, many people do not want to believe that cult torture is as common as it is, that it can happen in their own community where they thought like it's safe. So we go up against people's denial or their desire to protect themselves instead of being able to hear a survivor who went through really horrific things. But when people are denying it, that for many cult torture survivors can bring us back down into programming, because one of the most basic programs is to, one, not believe ourselves, not believe anyone inside who's talking about the torture, but also to believe that if we do talk about it, no one will believe us, therefore don't talk about it, right? It's core programming to protect the cult and to hurt us. So you can believe yourself and selves that are talking about it, and there may be people who have discomfort, and there may be people who don't believe you, but there always will be people who can hear you. So if someone isn't believing you, try someone else. Keep searching until you find someone who can believe you and hear you and respond with compassion and empathy.
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking my brain just went in two different directions. One, for providers who I think find the details so horrifying
Mm,
that the defense mechanism to protect their own psyche is to dismiss it
yeah.
or to say that it's made up and to shift content somewhere else. Or people will have these narratives to dismiss it by saying, "Oh, these things are so extreme that if they quote unquote were really happening, everybody would know." I think not understanding how systematic the
Yes.
operations of the cult are, right? So this is all, it sounds like, all planned out
Yes.
so meticulously
Yes.
and designed to ensure that everybody who reports cult abuse is labeled as crazy.
Yes. But also, so look at like what's coming out with the Epstein files or P. Diddy. Like, some of it was known to people and people were talking about it, and the people in power, let's say, when victims would go to the police, they weren't believing them or they weren't hearing them. But then there's how much was hidden and stayed hidden. Like, cult is so good at hiding in plain sight, at having really good social masks. Like, my parents were so good at that. They went to church every Sunday. My mother sang in the choir, my father taught Sunday school, and they could sound like liberal leaning, good people. And then there was everything that was happening at home every day and every night, and everything that was hidden. They're really, really good at social masks, and even at the professions that they choose and how they fit in. But it's really important to believe survivors. We are some of the most silenced people and systematically silenced in the cult torture and in the mind control. And it's really important to hear and believe survivors. And also, not believing us is exactly what the cult says will happen. It's reinforcing our trauma if you're like to not hear us. Yeah.
Looking at those dynamics, you're silenced in the cult,
Yes.
but then you also get silenced in the treatment community
Yeah.
and silenced just in the broader society because people don't want to know this stuff.
Yeah, they don't want to believe it. And so often, when I have told someone who doesn't know anything about cult torture, just a little bit about it. Like, let's say here in Toronto, where I live, they'll say, "Well, where did this happen? Where did you grow up?" And I'm like, "Toronto." And they don't believe it. Or like they do believe it when they hear me, but like they want to think it happened somewhere else, some other country, farther away, not in our own community. But we have to be able to look at what's happening in our community in order to change it and stop it and help people who are still being tortured and abused now.
I think so many people want to think that these things happen, 800 acres deep in the woods,
Yes.
far away from civilization. And so therefore they fly under the radar. And of course, nobody knows. And it's one in a million that might happen to. And it is really shocking to see how many people have cult abuse histories in their background. If you go to any survivor trauma conference, you see so many people that talk about their histories.
Mhm.
And it's really, really troubling that the treatment community and just society in general is so busy being self protective against the content that they're refusing the existence or refusing to listen.
But in some ways, that makes sense to me because our society is, in my opinion, set up for oppressors and abusers. Like, our society is so incredibly racist, homophobic, transphobic, ableist, misogynist. And when, let's say, a woman talks about rape that happened to her, and almost immediately, like if it's on social media, you will see people jump into the comments and blaming her. So, victim blaming her or not believing her. And that is an adult, right? Then you look at children, and people get even more not wanting to believe such extreme organized abuse and trafficking happen. But it does.
Yep, absolutely does.
We know that at least 1 in 3 girls, I think it is, and 1 in 5 boys are sexually abused in some form or another. But that is just based on who actually has come forward and the stats. It's not all the other kids who couldn't come forward. And cult torture happens in groups, and it is so incredibly organized, and they are interconnected, and they're sharing like torture techniques and victims and everything. To me, it's not surprising that there are so many survivors. I think it is hugely undercounted. And then there's also how our memories are repressed from the beginning because we are taught that by the abusers, but then also we're doing it for survival to like get through each day, dissociating
Right.
from it and forgetting it, and that's part of dissociative identity. So it can take years for someone to start remembering cult torture. It can start off slower. Like, I remembered incest first, and then I remembered more grotesque abuse, and then slowly torture, and then remembering who was involved. And that still took years and years and years to remember enough people to actually get completely fully safe. But it is normal to have repressed memories with trauma, and especially the
Yeah.
more extreme it is. So there are a ton of us.
It occurs to me I probably should have asked you to do this earlier, but for people who are not familiar with the term programming and cult programming, would you be able to define that?
Yeah, so programming is mind control, and mind control are messages and jobs, like instructions that are repeated over and over and over in conjunction with torture. So it goes in there really deeply. And for cult, they are deliberately giving that programming, so those jobs, to specific cult created folks inside to hold on to, where it is their only job often. And really, really common core basic programs are to have us not remember the torture, to have us not believe it if we do remember, to have us not talk about it, and also not even talk to folks inside. Like, there's supposed to be barriers between the self created folks inside and the cult created folks inside.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah, because then we might remember.
I was just kind of going back and forth between the next question, and I'm torn between signs and wanting to just dive right into the cult created parts and how they might show up for people and in systems who didn't even yet know that they're cult survivors.
Yeah, I did lead into that by what I was saying. So, cult created folks inside. The things that a therapist and or a survivor are most likely to see in the beginning are the core basic programs of keeping us from talking about the cult torture, keeping us from remembering it, and keeping us from believing it. So for folks inside who are taught to keep us from talking, they will silence us. They might actually like cut off our voice or our words, like even mid sentence. That happens to me, or have them narrow or tighten our throat so that it feels like we physically can't talk. I also have something I call cement mouth, where I feel like there's a seal between my lips and I actually can't physically open my lips to speak. And that's someone inside doing the job that they were taught to through torture, let's remember. So while I appreciate that they are doing their job that they were taught that actually kept us alive, I need to work with them to change it. So there's also folks inside who will gaslight us. They'll tell us the torture never happened, or like we're not even DID, that we're not plural, or you just made it all up, but you're trying to get attention, or you watched a movie and then you took it on. But those are things that our abusers said, and those are things that they were deliberately taught to tell us to make us doubt ourselves. There's also folks inside who were cult created who can, once we have started looking at the memories, they will flood us constantly with memories so that we're in crisis, so that we can't function, and so that we will want to shut it all down. And then there are folks inside who were deliberately taught by the cult to self harm us in some way. So, like physically or emotionally, or be constantly self hating or constantly criticizing ourselves, or basically like replicating our abusers. And then there's folks inside who will try to keep us from even being able to access the information. So, like, they'll put up mental blocks in our brain. They'll, like, make darkness when we're trying to look inside. They will silence anyone inside who wants to talk to us to keep them from talking. And they won't allow us access to those insiders or the memories. Or even they might metaphorically cut things out of our mind. So, I have folks inside who still, and I'm trying to work with them, who still keep me from taking in a positive that someone tells me. And so someone will tell me a compliment. And like a second later, I can't remember anything that that person said that is the actual compliment. Folks inside me were taught to do that. They were taught to do that to lower my self esteem, to keep me from bonding with other people, to keep me from feeling like I have safety with other people, anyone who is not cult. Because people who are not cult are going to appreciate me. They're going to give me warmth and compassion and empathy, and that will help me bond with them and get me safe away from the cult. So, those are some of the most common ways that we will see, especially in the beginning, but even later, since I still have folks inside trying to do some of those things, cult taught jobs that they will do.
I'm just I can see the deviousness of
Yes.
cult behavior, right? If they're using pairing torture with programming to essentially gaslight you,
Yes.
to say, your reality is not your reality. And it is so, well, hard to believe,
Mm.
right? And then therefore on the outside people are reflecting back that this is hard to believe. And you're left kind of in limbo with all of this pain and damage and scarring from a cult without enough support.
Yes. And we need support to heal and to get safe. But then, because the cult is so deliberate and calculated in what they do, there are things that they do to try and prevent anyone from believing us, like intentionally trying to discredit us. So there are some survivors, if they have not worked through the entire memory and they have not looked at it closely, they will only know the beginning. And so the cult does elaborate abuse scenarios where they might dress up as, say, aliens. And then they sexually assault us. And then if the survivor, we're kids when this happens, right? So they try to convince us it's real. They use really elaborate costumes, makeup, sound effects, everything. And if the survivor at the time can't see through it and they don't have anyone inside else who could, or they haven't talked with that part inside who could, or they haven't looked at the entire memory, they'll tell someone like, hey, I was abducted by aliens. And then people are going to go, well, of course you weren't. That's not true. So everything you said isn't true, instead of looking at the whole context and the whole memory. But that is an intentional form of trying to discredit survivors that the cult intentionally does. It's very deliberate and calculated and cruel.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the level of helplessness that people experience when they try to convey what they've been through,
Yeah.
and then the person on the receiving end, if they don't have enough education
Hmm.
about how cults operate, that they would just dismiss it as some type of nightmarish fantasy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you don't get help to heal.
Yes. And the cult does this in so many different forms of like a really elaborate abuse scenarios, including convincing us that we died. There are times when the cult would bring us to the point of death and then back again. But if someone says, I died and then I was brought back alive again, who's going to believe them? It's intentional on so, like there's so many intentional forms of manipulation that the cult is doing at the same time with the torture that they do.
It's really horrific when you think about what people have to survive.
It is.
And also just really horrific that there are people doing that to other human beings.
It is.
The current state of the world is reflective of some of that pure evil,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
For people who have co-created insiders, what would you say to them in terms of how do they begin to build trust and start working with them so that maybe they could begin to start dismantling some of the programs that would then allow them to talk more freely and access help for just for themselves?
Oh, that's such an important question. As I think often when we first start hearing the folks inside who were cult created, we can feel fear because they are so often replicating our abusers. They act like our abusers, they talk like our abusers, they hurt us intentionally. And it's important to remember that they were taught that through torture and that the cult would not have stopped the torture. They did not stop the torture until that personality, that folk inside was created. We need to have compassion for them. They went through what I couldn't go through. They kept our body alive and our mind alive, and they helped us stay sane by going through horrific things that no one should ever have to go through. So responding to them with compassion helps. Being able to hear the trauma that they went through, because they usually have it held really tightly inside, but they need to be heard just as much as everyone else needs to be heard. So if we can hear them with compassion and empathy, we can hear how they were created. It can help shift how they are, how they feel like they have to act. And if we can even thank them for helping us survive and have patience with them, which is really important, and also challenge the cult lies, challenge the cult taught thinking, then over time we can actually help change their job. Like they get to choose what they want to be, how they want to be. But first, they need to have that compassion and empathy, the respect, the actually being thankful that they went through it for us. And challenging those cult lies is so important. Like everything the cult taught us, usually it's the opposite that is the truth.
I'm sitting here thinking that there are people listening probably that are wondering the difference between, outside of the fact that they're cult created, that's a very obvious difference, but the difference between a cult created part and a persecutory part slash trauma holder in a system.
Well, a cult created part was taught very deliberately what to do, how to hurt us, how to silence us, how to keep us from believing or talking inside. They have very specific steps in the job that they will do, and they also have a cue that will set them off. Like when we talk about the cult torture and we're not supposed to, when we somehow break a cult rule. So it's very deliberately taught. And they will usually have very specific scripts that they are going by that they were taught by the cult as well. And often some of the ideology of the cult will come through that.
I wanted to pause to clarify that just because I can envision some people listening who maybe they're therapists who don't work with cult survivors currently and are listening to the language and conflating it.
Hmm.
Because I could envision how a cult survivor could end up on the receiving end of like just sort of feeling minimized.
Yeah.
or kind of conflated with a different type of part in their system. And if there's a way to really clearly define that so that that disconnect doesn't happen for people, I think we'll be doing folks a really big service.
I hope I said it clearly enough.
You did, but I was listening when you were talking about they went through things that I couldn't.
Hmm.
I could immediately made that jump over the bridge,
Mm-hmm.
right, to folks who will say, "But that's what my trauma holders did."
Yes.
And then when you talked about parts that were programmed to keep you silent, for example, and then I think, well, we have persecutory parts that can do that and protective parts. I can just see where people could actually begin to conflate issues a little bit because language is so similar.
Yes.
So just being able to tease that out a little bit to help people see the difference between somebody who is literally programmed to behave in a certain way and that they react to cues. It's a little bit like program cues.
Yes.
That is different, right,
Yes.
than a protector part or even a persecutory part who might be there as a way of helping the entire system withstand whatever abuse is coming down the line, right? Like however they're going to potentially harm the body.
I think I could add slightly
That makes
to
sense.
it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So, cult trained or cult created parts, if you ask them, if you actually talk to them, like, when did you first come up with this belief or idea, or like, who taught you this? If they can talk about it, you will see how often it was repeated, how intentional what they were taught was, how intentional through torture and mind control. And then you see it is cult created and very, very intentional and calculated.
I think that's a great delineation for people to really clarify. How do you start to disentangle all of that programming without completely re-traumatizing parts in your system? I think like therapists definitely are going to want to know the answer to that question, but so does everybody who thinks like I might have a cult history. How do I look at this stuff without completely leveling my system?
I think it can help to check in with folks when you're starting to deal with programming. And if there's anyone inside who doesn't want to stay, who doesn't feel safe enough, they could go somewhere safe inside while you're dealing with it. But I also think it helps to really gently challenge the cult lies and beliefs, but repeatedly. Remind them that everything the cult taught them was a lie, that it was cruel and deliberate only for the benefit of the cult, that they can't trust the cult, and that the cult only wants to control us and to hurt us. And they are often not aware of everything else that happened to everyone inside. And if they can stay present for some of it and see how it hurts them or see how their job is hurting them, that can help. But it also really helps to hear them with compassion and empathy, including the trauma, how they were created. And it helps to ask if they can talk about, if they remember how they were taught these beliefs, because then they are looking at the trauma. And then if you are giving them compassion and empathy and saying, hey, that should never have happened to you, and that was cruel and deliberate, then over time, they get to see that they did not deserve to be treated the way they were. And then they don't need to treat other people in that way because they slowly gain more empathy. I think it helps to tell them that they did not deserve to be hurt. No one inside did, and they still don't. And patience is really important because think of how programming is put there. It is put there through repeated extreme torture. You're not going to dismantle it in one session or like 10 sessions. You need patience and compassion and empathy. Compassion and empathy, it sounds so little, but it is so important because what the cult does is filled with hate. There is no compassion and empathy. So when you start giving those cult created parts compassion and empathy, it cuts through the hate and it cuts through the lies and the programming. I do have some articles that I wrote about programming that are up on my website. I did put probably too many steps. You don't have to do everything in them. You just pick and choose what is working for you. But for us, it really has helped to talk with those, like to have those folks inside tell us their trauma, treat them with compassion and empathy, but also respect. Like they often, for me, they are ones that posture with a lot of like toughness and they want to be seen as tough and they are for what they endured and went through. but they also have some vulnerability. But it does help to go like, hey, like you were so strong to go through that, and do you know that you never should have had to? Do you know it was not okay what happened? Do you know that that is like a human rights violation? And you can help them see that.
Are there things that you do to help those parts hold on to the new information? Because I'm sitting here thinking, how do they not just flip right back into the programming after you have those conversations?
I have asked them to stay present, to stay watching what happens in the outside world. That helps a little, and to keep coming back to therapy. But we do need the repetition. I think that so often those folks, the co-created ones, they wanted us to survive. That's why they were created. They wanted us to get through the extreme torture. And if they see that looking at it in a new way, having some healing, seeing that the cult lied to them, if they can hold on to that, that will help us get safer and safer sooner, then often they do want to. But still, it can take a long time to move a cult created folk inside into wanting to change their job completely. But you can see a softening over time in a good way. It doesn't mean that they're less strong. It actually takes so much strength to be able to embrace compassion or be able to treat ourselves that way when we were taught the opposite. It takes so much strength.
It makes sense that this would take a really long time, and I appreciate the tension that some providers feel themselves in because in the era of managed care in the United States,
Mm,
there's such limited sessions in the UK, for example. There's this pressure to move people forward definitively faster than they're able to, and not falling prey to this external pressure of a system that doesn't work, and understanding that DID really the healing is long-term work. All types of DID, right? Whether it's co-created or some other thing that this is not something that changes quickly.
no, and the trauma was usually so long term. Like think about how often it happened in our childhood. Like for me, it was every day and every night. That that does not just change overnight. And for me, I think I'm going to always be healing because the torture was most of my life and it was so extreme. It's okay to need support. It's important to have that support, and we have to have it to keep looking at the layers and layers of what was done, but also change things in our life now. I wish that also like the insurance companies were different in the US and but everywhere that there was more realization of how like survivors need support, and it's okay to have long-term support. And that doesn't mean that you're not doing good work. You can do really good work and then revisit something on a different layer, on a deeper level, and then it changes things and it shifts things, but we still need support. That's okay.
Yeah. I wish people gave more credence to mental health because without mental health, you don't have any kind of health,
Yes.
but it's definitely not something that's valued very highly, certainly not in the corporate world or in the insurance world where in a capitalistic society, everything comes down to your dollar bill rather than the value of human life and the quality that that person's able to experience.
Yeah. You said that so well.
I mean, I feel like we can improve anybody's quality of life with accommodations, and there's a system that's just not willing to put accommodations in place.
It's so
Be-
frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, it categorically values different lives. So it's ableist, right?
Yes.
So if you're able-bodied and able in a mental health capacity, then we value you and you can have what you need. But if you don't have those things, you can't have what you need,
Yes.
and you continue to suffer. And somehow, whoever is in charge of this crazy setup believes that that's an okay thing.
Yeah.
I think that there are both systems and therapists out there wondering what you do about cult created parts whose job it is to annihilate the human being. I think that scares therapists a lot. And I think it scares systems a lot, like feeling like I have a part in me that the cult created, and its job is to completely get rid of me from this planet.
Yeah, it can feel really scary. I think when it comes down to suicidal ideation programming or self harm programming, it's really important to help the cult created folks inside who are giving that, to help them realize that if they damage the body, they are also damaging themselves. If they unalive the body, they are also unaliving themselves. So often, those parts, they were created when we were children, teaching those folks inside that they will have control over the body after the whoever they're teaching, like telling someone inside to kill themselves after they do that. But they don't realize that they will die too. Like, it's so important to help them see that they are part of a body and part of an entire system that works together, and what they do will affect them too, even though they don't believe it.
Do they have survival instincts?
Yes, because they were created in the first place to keep us alive. And they do still want us to be alive. They actually are protective in that no one else inside could take on that job, but they did. They kept us alive. And they really do want us to live deep down underneath. It's just that they were taught this job over and over and over. So it's, again, it's really important to work with them with compassion and empathy and help them see through the cult lies.
I can see where not having that piece of information could be the barrier in a therapist choosing to work with somebody who has a cult history, right? If I'm afraid of cult created parts and I'm a therapist, how helpful am I going to be?
Hmm. Yeah, they're not anyone to be afraid of. They wanted to keep the body alive. They wanted to keep themselves alive. They just need compassion and empathy and see through the cult lies.
What about less obvious signs that might, something subtle that might cue a therapist to the fact that they might be working with somebody who has a cult history?
Okay, so it would not just be having one or two or three of these symptoms. It would be like having many, many of them, but having a revulsion to or obsession with death or graveyards or violence, including in movies and TVs and books. Having a revulsion of or fear of or being really subservient to or really obsessed with authority figures, but especially doctors, nurses, police, military, religious figures, even judges and lawyers and therapists and teachers, because the cult will dress up as those authority figures. And notice that most or all of those authority figures would have to legally be bound to tell if the child, like report if they suspect the child was being sexually abused. So it's very intentional that those are the ones having a rough time, including suicidal ideations, self-harm urges around most holidays, especially the religious holidays and especially our own birthdays. Having an extremely high pain tolerance, or shutting down, not reacting outwardly when we are physically hurt, though this does lower through healing and through being in therapy for a while. But again, it's looking at the whole list. Being unable to cry or really struggling to. Like we used to cry maybe once every 5 or 10 years, and now through healing we are able to do it more often. But we will say we're crying when our eyes just, get a little wet, like because it we were taught not to cry, and it's such a basic form of programming. Inner folks with the dissociative identity believing that they're demons or evil, or that they will hurt others or somehow like poison them or affect them just by being near them or by caring about them or by talking about something. And also insiders who believe that they're ghosts, or that they're dead, or they've come back from the dead, or they were told that they were. Having someone inside believe that someone else can read their mind or control them, like through telepathy or through technology like a microchip or whatever, strongly being repelled by or obsessed with organized religion, or being afraid of or obsessed with medical procedures, operations, medical equipment. It's again used in programming. And something as little as, and many trauma survivors have this, not wanting to go to bed, being afraid of the dark, being afraid of nighttime, waking up frequently, having trauma, memory, nightmares. Those are some of the more subtle signs.
And you're saying that out of the subtle signs, the more of those that you have, that would be the more of an indicator.
Yeah, and
So it's not just if you have one thing,
no,
that doesn't mean, yeah.
yeah, it's many, many, many of them. And then it still doesn't mean that. It just means you might want to explore that.
That leads right into the great question, I think, of What do you wish more therapists understood about working with cult survivors?
I wish that therapists knew that, well, it may be hard for them to hear at times. We need to know that they are okay with hearing us. We need to know that they can take care of themselves, that we are not hurting them by talking about it. We are going to need reassurance over and over and over about that because we were taught it. We were told that if we talked, it would kill other people. So we need a lot of reassurance about that, or at least I do. I think it's so important to believe and hear cult torture survivors. We were so repeatedly told that we wouldn't be. And we need a lot of compassion and empathy and gentleness and love, like that loving gaze that I've heard you talk about. It's all the opposite of hate and that we were given for most of our lives. So we often do need a lot of support. What happened to us was so extreme and often for quite a lot of our lives, but we are also incredibly strong. Like you can trust us in our healing and that we want to heal and that we can heal. And we have been through more than like most people can imagine. But when you repeatedly offer us compassion and empathy and like a safe space, a loving gaze, like new healing techniques, we can learn to give that to ourselves. And that relationship is so freaking important. Like we need that healthy, caring attachment where like ruptures are repaired, like where you apologize if there's like a boundary that's been passed or like trust in some way has been broken or something has happened. So much trauma happened in relationships. So we need that healing now in a relationship. And mind control and like the cult created folks inside, it can seem really complicated, but always love and compassion will cut through the hate and the teachings that they were given. So it's not as complicated as you think. And there is always, always a way around the programming, a way to circumvent it, or a way to mute it or lessen it. You just have to use maybe some imagination inside with the internal world, or thinking outside the box, or thinking a little bit differently. Like, mm, so many of me were told that we could not talk. And so the way that we got around it was by taking it literally. So folks inside me would write and draw because that's not telling, that's not talking, right? And
Yep.
it was a way to get around it that worked. There's always a way to get around it. And many, many therapeutic techniques that are used in therapy, even EMDR, are used in the cult torture. So cult creates folks inside that are reporters that will report back to the cult what they're doing in therapy. And then they will talk about like the therapeutic techniques are used, and then cult will start to use those techniques to interfere with the therapy and try to keep the survivor from escaping completely and getting safe. So it's really, really important for therapists to be able to modify those techniques, like including for us, EMDR, we had to have it modified to be able to use it in a way that worked for us, and also be open to using many modalities. Like, I can't do deep breathing. I cannot be much in my body, especially if I'm talking about the torture. I can't do guided meditation or hypnosis because cult used all of those things, but I can ground in other ways. Just ask me. Like, I right now have bare feet flat on the ground. That is grounding me. I have a weighted blanket on my lap. That is grounding me. I have asked folks inside specifically to be here. That is grounding me. But I can't do it in a way that is led or other ways that are common for people. That's okay. Just let me do it my own way. I can do EMDR, but I can only do it modified so that I don't have to be in my body, so that I don't have to rate things by numbers. But it can work really well with me if it's modified. We also, because we had such extreme control used against us, like we need kind consistency, but we also often need less rigid boundaries than perhaps a therapist has been taught. Like, so it can really help to have connection in between sessions, like being able to email a therapist and have a therapist hear it. It may allow someone inside who can't talk in any other way to tell the therapist something really important. It can also help keep the attachment because for many of us, we can lose attachment over a period of time, and it helps keep up that safety. It can help on so many levels. but therapists often are taught not to do that. But you don't have to have a big response. You can just say, like, heard it, let's talk next session. You can also set a limit on how many like emails there are. But if you're allowing an email, like let's say 2 a week or 5 a week or whatever the number is, that will help us build in therapy greater trust and be able to work on things that we couldn't otherwise. And like from I know that like safe touch is a huge issue too, that many therapists, like because of the boundaries of the overseeing, that they're not allowed to. But for me, having safe touch with my therapist was the first safe touch and the only safe touch I had had in my life. And it helped me have enough safety to be able to look at the deep trauma that I was so scared to look at. But I would not have been okay with that in the beginning, and some survivors will never ever want that. But for me, that was a key part of my healing too. If you do not have experience with cult torture or DID, but you have a good relationship with your client, the client has trust with you, they feel safe with you, please don't pass on the client to a specialist. There are not enough therapists who know about or can work with these issues. And we need you. So research it. Can get consultation with someone who has the experience. There are some really good books out there, including the ones by Alison Miller. She has a ton that are written for therapists. She also has one that's written for survivors. There's a Safe Passage to Healing too by Christine Oksana. There are so many survivors talking on social media. There are lots of articles. You can dig really deeply into this. And also, don't just expect your client to give you all the information. Like, it really, really helps to have some yourself. I get so tired of being the one to always educate. And I know I mentioned it before, but it is so important to reassure us that you can take care of yourself and you're not going to be hurt by what we're talking about. So it really helps if you can reassure us about that.
And I think for for therapists listening, when you say it's really important that we as therapists can reassure that we can take care of ourselves, it is also really important that we as therapists are showing an emotional register of what
Yes.
it is that we're listening to,
Yes.
because I've seen people really take that very literally and they don't have an emotional reaction to horrific information. And yeah, I mean, the client can see that you're not quote unquote impacted by it. But I think there's a difference, right? Most everyone is looking for the fact that you register that
Yes.
something terrible has happened and that that is important and it matters. And in that registering, we're reflecting back the worth to the client. We know we reflect back their own worth and that what happened to them matters. And that's really important in care.
It's
You know,
so important.
it's not, that you are made of steel and you can
No.
tolerate anything. I don't think
No.
anybody's looking for that in the treatment room, but I absolutely have seen people take it that way.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up because if someone did that with me, I would lose trust. I would think, well, so you're not impacted by it or you're masking. Like, I would immediately go to not trusting, but I would also go to, oh, so then everything I went through, you don't care about it, it doesn't matter. I do need to know that it mattered and that it was horrific what we went through. I just need to know that if it brings up your own triggers, you will go work on your triggers. If you find yourself really upset, that you have a way to use nervous system regulation techniques or like somehow bring yourself back to a grounded place. That's all. You do not have to mask and hide and pretend that nothing affects you.
Yeah, there's a difference, right, between being impacted
Yes.
and leveled by.
Yes.
Like, you can't be leveled by what your clients are saying to you, but it's really important to register that impact and unconditional positive regard, which is a fancy word for love
Yes.
in therapy. I think that's really important. And when I listen to you talk about the things that are really helpful, it really underscores the need to have a clinician who can lean into their clinical intuition
Yes.
and not subscribe strictly to certain delivery models of care, right? Like, you can't just say, I'm an IFS therapist and that's all I'm going to do is IFS therapy. I'm an EMDR therapist and all I'm going to do is EMDR. It's that ability to really feel your way through care with somebody and do the thing that's feeling right and constantly be monitoring the client's response to it. Because there are people out there, right, who will say you should never ever listen to the details of somebody's trauma.
What?
And because they'll say if you're talking about your trauma, you're re traumatizing and it's harmful to the nervous system. I think what people are missing there, especially for people who have, if you're treating people who have DID, that maybe that works for somebody who has a single incident trauma, right? Where you're not going to talk about the details and you're going to use sensory motor therapy or you're going to do EMDR. Okay, maybe that works. When you have DID or OSDD, you also have parts of yourself that are just not going to ever let you stop looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you get stuck in trauma loops, not, and then that's not necessarily the part fronting, right? That's something that's given to you through other insiders in your system. And it is really important to be able to share what's happening so you can untangle it together.
But also so that you're believed, and also so that you can work through the shame or the guilt or the pain. Like, how do you get that out without being heard? It's so important to be heard. And when it comes down to such extreme torture that happens that we are told no one will believe or no one will hear, and then you don't hear us, it's just going to reinforce the programming. Like, for me, it's so core and important to my healing to be heard, but to be heard with compassion and empathy, and then work through the emotions and work through everything else. I can't do it without talking about what I went through.
There's such a focus on nervous system regulation that there are actually practitioners out there. And I'm not saying that everybody's doing it. So don't come at me, folks. But if you are one of the ones that is so focused on nervous system regulation to the exclusion of content and relationship building and rapport and the exchange of compassion, empathy, and gentleness, I think that's really problematic.
Hmm.
That's another way of silencing people, right?
Yes, it is. And we can regulate afterwards. But to be constantly holding on to the trauma that we went through and not have any valve of release, not have any way that we are believed and heard or get it out, is just going to make it bigger inside, and we're not going to be okay.
Yeah, I don't think anybody wants to run around the face of the earth doing the butterfly hug 25, 24/7. I just added an hour to the day, 25/7. Wait, what? I just gave us all 7 more hours in the week.
I need them.
Me too, actually. I could use a few more. It's hard to divvy up time in one body
It
sometimes.
is.
Are there things that you can, I mean, we've gone through many things that therapists can do, but in order for somebody to feel safe enough, like I get intimately that safety may not exist ever for some people. But are there things that a therapist can do to create a safe enough environment for therapy to progress?
I think it's going to be different for every survivor, but for us, a huge part of it is like the attachment to that therapist, the feeling safe with how they are with us. So the compassion and empathy and how they're relating to us, and that they are not shutting us down, that they are hearing us and believing us, especially when it comes to the torture and the mind control, challenging the cult lies of those folks inside so that we and they can are able to hold on to our truth. And I know I've repeated it multiple times, but we're going to need that reassurance that you can take care of yourselves and that you don't hate us, that you don't blame us, that you don't find us disgusting the way our abusers said we would, and that it wasn't our fault, that we did not have a choice as a child or a teen, or even as an adult. I could not have overpowered a group, I could not stop them. It's really important to have that reassurance because so often we do blame ourselves for everything that happened, and we see ourselves as like more powerful than we were. Please, please also educate yourself about cult torture, DID, mind control that's specific to cult torture, so we're not always educating. That will help with feeling safer. And talk with everyone inside who shows up. Like, and also don't push us for names if we are not willing to give it. Like, sometimes people are really insistent on who is this. But if someone inside is not telling you who they are, there's a reason. There is programming there that is blocking that, or there is not a level of safety. So, like, don't push for it. Just work with who's there, accept them, appreciate them, hear what they have to say, but go as slowly as the system needs. And you may, again, need to modify techniques and ask what's working and what isn't, or what they need. Like, so often we do know what we need. Show up consistently and gently with compassion, but know that people inside are going to respond or react in different ways to that. Like, my tough guys are going to posture and, like, I know everything's fine. You don't need to reassure me. But they really do deep down want that reassurance. But so, how you're going to respond to a tough guy, although ours have gentled and become more compassionate, or how you're going to react to a child part is going to be really different. Like, you have to change your attitude a little bit to fit with each person that shows up inside, just the way you would with somebody who's walking into the room, right? That is different. You're going to respond in a different way. And try to work with the client the way that they need to. Like, for many, many years, I had folks inside telling memories only by drawing and writing. The drawing and the writing was very graphic and clear, but they were doing it that way because they could not talk out loud. And my therapist just accepted it and worked with it in that way. She didn't push us, and that helped so much. And for me and for other cult torture survivors, it's not going to be true for every survivor, but for many of us, we have a reaction to someone wearing completely all black, all red, all white, or a combination of those, because those are cult cloak colors. And it's also a cue for programming that they are cult, or it's a signal that they are cult. So, of course, programming is based something basic like that, like fearing that someone is cult or that everyone is cult. It's intentionally based on something that is really common in our society. Like, so many people wear all black. So they know that it's constantly set off that we are afraid, but you don't want to have that fear reaction in your client by the way you're dressed. So you just might check that out with them, that if that's true for them. And also notice if your client starts getting dissociated or frozen or has a fear response or suddenly falls into like self-hate or self-silencing, because they may be reacting to breaking a cult rule like talking, or there might actually have been an external cue that you did not knowing that you did it. Because again, there are really basic common core programs that are based on body language that so many people use and so are repeated over and over. And there are some really common ones to silence ourselves that people can do without knowing that they are doing. And so just check in, like, hey, what happened right now? Or what did you hear what I said? Like, you can find out what's happening by asking those kind of questions and have those really clear limits and boundaries, but with compassion and kindness, like we talked about. Like, if you can allow a survivor to email you in between sessions, that will help so much.
That can make such a difference, honestly, for anybody that has DID, regardless of how it came to be.
Yeah.
I think that there are therapists who are newer, or any provider who's newer into working with people who have DID, who don't understand that we don't have access to all parts at all times
Yes.
at all.
Yes.
And all parts at all times are not listening and can't hear and don't know and don't understand. And, some of them might have really big feelings that they're confused about because they're really deep down in the system, and they kind of have a really big emotion that they can feel, but there's zero context, and now they're terrified. They don't really know exactly why. It just feels scary. Like, there's so many things that go on
Hmm.
that parts and systems don't understand. So, not assuming that everybody knows everything is a really helpful thing to do, and to think about how you can always be asking, who else in your system needs to know this?
Yes.
Who else in your system needs to be present? Who else in your system needs to maybe be protected from this piece of information or this appointment or event or whatever is coming up? Like, really focusing on the fact that the system is your client, not the part sitting in front of you, is so important.
Oh, I agree. It's a really good point.
Yeah, I was just thinking about how sometimes there are just, I don't even know that it's an assumption that gets made. I think for people who don't have lived experience themselves, it just doesn't occur to them, because they're so used to having access to kind of everything within themselves, that it's really hard for them to understand that there are parts that act independently who have no clue about what you talked about last week.
Yes.
Or,
Yep.
Like, no clue at all.
or even sometimes 5 minutes ago.
This is true. Yes, this is very true. So you'll always being curious about who else, who else, who else,
Yes.
and reminding the clients too to check in.
Hmm.
Did you check with everybody else about that? Have you left information through various channels? Because not everybody can is listening and can hear, and some people need sticky notes, and some people need maps, and all kinds of different things.
Yeah. We email ourselves information too.
Yeah, and I think when you do that, right? I think therapists need to realize that it's in the allowing of between session contact
Hmm.
that you can see other parts that are there, because parts that only come out at night, if you're seeing your client at 10 a.m.,
Hmm.
you're never going to have contact potentially with the part that's present at 9 p.m.
Yes. And then I've also had where I've had sort of like a really adverse, strong reaction to something, and I've dealt with it, and then I forget to tell my therapist because it happened 5 days ago, unless it's written down.
Yes. And sometimes, even when it's written down,
Yeah,
depending on who's in session, it doesn't even carry the same
wait,
impact or weight,
yes.
So it's, here's this thing is on my list. I'm just going to tell you what it is. And we don't have to do anything with it because I'm not remotely impacted by it.
Yeah, even though everyone else inside was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't do anything with that piece of information because it's not me who's affected.
But if we can write to you about it, then you're going to hear these things.
I think too, understanding the littler parts in a system that may or may not have object constancy,
Hmm.
who just sometimes need to know that you exist
Yes.
in the world. And that can be something as simple as letting them send you an emoji
Yep.
and you send an emoji back.
Yep.
It doesn't have to, we're not talking about doing therapy over email or
No.
doing therapy over text messaging. We're talking about touch points that can be transitional and touch points that can help you get to know who else is in the system, which will allow your client to heal.
Yes.
Mm. So, you are all a very gifted author and you have written some phenomenal books. Can you tell us a little bit about your books?
Yes. I've had 5 books published traditionally. Scars, Hunted, Stained. These are all for teens, but adults read them too. And 2 high-low books. Scars, Hunted, and Stained all have fragments of my own trauma experience, but also my healing. Scars is about Kendra, who is trying to, well, she's self harming and she needs to stop self harming and face her past in order to get safe. And it's a very personal story for me. It's actually got my own arm on the cover, and it has helped so many survivors stop self harming, get into therapy, and even keep them from killing themselves. Of all my books that have been published, Scars has the most of my experience, my trauma, and my healing in it. It is a book of my heart and my soul, and I am so grateful that it has helped so many people. And I have a book that I have written even more of my heart and my soul in. It's called Escape the Night, and it is sitting with editors right now. I'm really hoping they'll take it on because it is about a cult torture survivor who's a non binary lesbian like me, who has resulting DID like me, who needs to work with a cult created part inside of them to save a trafficked girl and save themselves. And I think it could bring a lot of healing in the world. I really hope a publisher takes it on. Stained is about Sarah, who was abducted and she has to find a way to save herself. And all my books have really strong survivors who save themselves. Hunted is a fantasy, but it was for me an analogy, and I was thinking about cult torture because Caitlin, who is a paranormal who has telepathy, she is hunted for who she is. And it's illegal for her to be who she is. So it actually fits many things now that are happening. But also for me, it was like an analogy of the cult torture. And then Visions, which is my self-published book, Kate sees visions of people being hurt and she needs to be able to stop them. but she only has visions when she has an asthma attack, which means it's putting her in danger. And again, like there's fragments of my trauma in all these books, but healing too, and hope, and queer characters, because we need to see ourselves.
They sound phenomenal.
Thank you.
How has writing helped you all in your own healing? And super curious too about how you navigate that place where you're trying to tell the really hard truths and same time building safety for your readers.
Thank you. My books gave me a voice. I was silenced so often and threatened if we talked. And so having my books published and helping others through my books, that gave me my voice back. And then also now my videos on social media. But the most healing thing for me has been the reader letters and the comments I get, like how my books have helped them feel seen, or it helped them stop cutting, or get into therapy, or talk to someone for the first time about being queer, or their sexual abuse, or their self harm, or even kept them from killing themselves. Like, that is so meaningful to me, and it helps me want to be here more. And I do include fragments of my own trauma in my books and also healing, but I also put in hope and happy but realistic endings and good support people who help counteract some of the trauma. And the good thing about a book is that you can put it down anytime that you feel overwhelmed, and it will still be there for you to come back to afterward.
I just have to name this because somebody inside is not going to let me not name it. When you said writing's been really important because I've been silenced, right? How incredibly badass is it that you've been silenced and you just go publish a book for the entire world to read? I mean, that is incredible, you know?
Well, thank you.
There's something that feels so powerful about that.
Thank you. For me, in Scars, I ended up putting tiny fragments of DID and programming that other people will not see. But if you are a cult torture survivor, or you're DID yourself, or you work with us, you may actually see it. And I love that I was able to get that in there, and that the publisher maybe wasn't aware at the time, but that it is my truth out there. And yeah, my way of taking back my own power, my voice.
That's so affirming, for people to see and to read.
Thank you.
Oh, I love that you guys write.
Thank you. It's so important for us. It's part of our healing, the writing and our art too.
Well, and you all sound so driven to helping other people. Can I spare somebody else from going through the same suffering for the same length of time that I've had to go through it? And there is something really hard to put into words, but that feels incredibly good about being able to help another human being.
Oh, it's huge.
Like to lighten their load a little bit, to give them insight, understanding, a connection to healing that just, it justifies that feeling, justifies words.
Yeah. It feels really good on a deep level. It feels right on a deep level to be able to help others, and to be able to help them put into words their own trauma, or help them be believed, or help them make connections sooner, or help them get safe sooner. Like, I don't want anyone to go through what I went through ever, but I know that they are. But if we can help them get safe sooner, sooner than I did, then I'm so grateful and glad.
On a personal note, would you be willing to share some of the practices that you all engage in that have been really helpful for your own healing?
Well, writing and art, they are such a key part for me. But also being able to talk about the cult torture and the programming and be able to name it and being heard with compassion, that is such a huge part of my healing. And then the safe relationships that I've had where I've actually had compassion and empathy, that is so core to my healing. Another thing that really helps us with programming is to map it out. So we have folks inside who can map out our dissociative system, and then we have folks really close to them who can also map out programming if we ask them and if they're willing to. And so they will map out the programming with the cue, like what is setting off the program, and then who inside is supposed to act on that cue. And there's usually like multiple groups, like sometimes there's like 6 separate groups that have very specific jobs, and then they map out each step that each of those groups inside are supposed to do for that particular program. And it will often end up as the same end result, but many steps to go there and very different reactions inside. And it helps so much to be able to see it mapped out and to recognize, like, hey, this has been happening and this has been happening and this has been happening. And that means there's like 3 or 4 or 6 groups all acting together on the same program. And then it can help us work on it better and more deeply. Letting inner kids play and having, okay, everyone inside needs to have time. And it helps when we have cooperation to do things that everyone inside wants. But the kids, for me, have such joy and hope. Not all the kids. Like, there's some kids who are just traumatized, who are stuck in the trauma. But there are kids who have hope and playfulness and joy when I can't access it. And so letting them be out and letting them have time shifts my mood. I can be in really, really deep depression, and then a kid will come out and go, "Hey, like, look at that cloud. It looks like whatever." And or
Yeah.
just look at the beauty of the tree, and it will shift my mood, and I need that. So that's really important. Working on the inner communication and the inner cooperation, and also for me, like remembering the torture and the programming, those are the things that helped us get safe. That's what helped us to stop losing time. That's what helped us know who to avoid, and eventually we got completely safe by those things. And not masking my DID, like when I am with people where I can just completely switch in and out the way that is natural for me, like Kidadal, 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 or whoever it is, like I feel so much freer. I feel so much better. I am expending less energy. I feel seen and heard. I feel accepted if I am with somebody who's safe and they do accept me. That is so important to my healing. And so for me, that is finding other folks who are DID or finding people that we can just be ourselves with, even if they are not DID. Like I have my naturopath and naturopath student who hear me and believe me. So that's part of the healing. Hear me with compassion and empathy. That's part of it. But I also don't have to mask with them. They just are, they're fine with me switching and moving in and out. And I am so grateful for that. But I'm also so less exhausted. Like it takes a lot of energy to be constantly masking as one. And it is hard to do, and finding community with other survivors and DID folk, like online, in person if you can. Again, the not having to mask, the being appreciated and understood even as we switch, but just also having someone else understand on a really deep level and not having to explain it is like such a
Yeah.
wonderful, freeing thing. My best friend is also a cult torture survivor, also polyfragmented DID, and like we can just talk and talk and talk, and there is so much healing that happens in doing that, in like not having to explain on a deep level, on just being accepted and being able to switch freely, and like her kids are talking to my kids and her tough guys are talking to my tough guys, and there's so much joy in that. And even when we're talking about really traumatic things, there is so much healing that happens. So finding community and talking, for me, talking about the cult torture and the mind control and the DID in the ways that I do. Like I used to, I still write articles, but I have them on my website. I used to post them in survivor newsletters and my art as well, talking about all these things, a traveling art show, talking at conferences, and now through social media and of course my books, where I can reach more survivors, I can reach therapists, I can educate the public in a bigger way. I am being heard and believed, but I also know that I am helping other survivors in their healing and I am helping therapists be able to work with us better. And that is so important to me. And that feels like a huge part of my healing too.
So many great things.
Thank you.
I loved that you called out how important it is to have system friends if you have DID, because it's something I feel like there's a significant portion of the mental health field that discourages it,
Yes. And
which
why?
is crazy to me.
Like,
I remember years ago asking a therapist about like a group or something, and she was like, "Oh, no, no, that's discouraged because people tend to quote unquote get worse."
that's absurd.
Right? I mean, I suspect that she means by worse, she means that if somebody was in the group, they could observe switching.
Yeah.
Like,
Because we feel
who cares?
safe
Like,
and we're not masking.
with
Come on. That's so much better.
I think that's the neuronormative judgment.
Yeah.
So just because single identity has been determined to be normative or maybe the most quote prevalent, it doesn't mean that you should be valuing it over
No.
types of neurodiversity. Like there's nothing wrong with plurality. There's nothing wrong with
N-
autism. There's nothing wrong. Like,
Yes.
what are we doing?
Yeah. And also, like, I have functional multiplicity. I'm happy with it. I'm good with it. I function in the world. I don't need, and I will not, I cannot become like a singleton. Like, my brain isn't built that way.
It's so interesting because that topic comes up so often, right? Where there's this pressure in some circles, in some mental health circles, to fuse or integrate. Those terms can mean different things, but most people use them interchangeably.
Hmm.
You know, it's who knows who can actually integrate versus fuse
Hmm.
to begin with. And for some of the people who have said that they fuse, like later on, they say, well, actually, I didn't. I
Yes.
was just actually pleasing the therapist because I knew I was supposed to. And I didn't want them to think that I wasn't better, even though my life has changed like drastically for the positive. It,
Or they think that they actually did, and then like a year or two later, that folk inside comes back and is presenting again.
yep, surprise.
And also, it reminds me, for me, of what cult did. Like, they tried to kill off folks inside. Like, you can't kill someone inside who's like, they're in
Yeah.
the brain, they're in the mind, they're living. As long as our body's living, they're here too. At least that's my belief.
Yeah. I mean, I'll never take away that somebody's experience of somebody saying, hey, I fused
Yeah.
and I'm
Yeah.
really happy. That's great.
Yeah.
That truly great. I just feel like it's exceptionally ableist for somebody with a single identity to force that onto
It
somebody.
is ableist.
Right. And I also don't know that everybody really is able to
Mm-hmm.
do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's true to say as well that sometimes people fuse who didn't want to,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes people don't fuse who do want to.
Yes.
And I don't know how much control over that we really do have. The system has always seemed to know what to do to survive and to do well. And I think it's going to continue to do that, regardless of what external humans want to happen.
Agreed.
you know? And there's nothing more lovely than insiders in your system having friends themselves in other systems.
Oh, it's such a wonderful feeling.
It really is. There are very few places where somebody with DID can truly show up authentically.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's probably not going to happen in aisle 5 of Costco.
Unless you happen to be with another plural system and you decided you don't care.
That's true. It's true. Yeah, it's so funny. I wish that there was a way to help people with singular identities. I really understand on a deeper level than some of them do. I think there are those that do. I don't want to take that away from people who are really great at being able to put themselves in our shoes. But there are a lot of people who aren't and
Yes.
can speak in some ways that are really pathologizing and demeaning,
Yes.
but yeah. If there was somebody listening to us talk today that started checking boxes in their mind, right? And start thinking, oh, maybe this is in my past. More than just a it's more than just a quick thought, right? It's something that's landing in their bodies and they're like, "Oh, I think this is actually a thing for me." What would you want them to know?
Well, there's hope, there's healing, that it's possible, and I believe you, and what happened is real, and you can believe the folks inside who are telling you things, and you are not alone. There are so many survivors. And I know that it can feel overwhelming or even unbearable sometimes, but you can get through it. It helps to find compassionate, safe people that you can get support from, learn some new healing techniques, lean into those parts of you that you really trust, like wise parts, or mothering or parenting parts, or protective parts, or therapist parts. I have therapist parts even. And that can include, kids too, who have that hope and playfulness and see things differently. And it helps, again, finding community and finding a really good therapist who you trust, or a mental health coach. it's so hard and frustrating because we have been through so much trauma, and it means we need a lot of therapy, and that can be really hard to find if you're also affected, like your mental health is affected, then your physical health can be affected and your finances can be affected. But there are some therapists and coaches who have sliding scales, and it also really, really can help our healing like so much deeper and faster if we can talk with other cult torture survivors, if we can talk with other folks who are DID. There are some groups online. I've linked to some on my website, or just even hearing another survivor talk at a conference or on social media, just knowing you're not alone and being reminded like you're not making it up, you're not crazy the way a cult told you, that can help so much. And if you start talking about it like in therapy or with someone you trust and they don't believe you, like keep looking for someone who will believe you. There are people who will, who can hear you with compassion and empathy. And I think friendships with other survivors help so much. Like if we can find and talk to another survivor who is on the same level of healing that we are, or the same level of knowledge, and it is a real back and forth, it's not just where like one person is giving all the support, that can be a huge part of our healing that like thrusts us even farther and faster. And okay, suicidal ideation programming and self-harm programming comes up a lot when we start looking at the trauma, but please remember that that is what the cult wants, right? They want to silence us. They want us like to not talk, to not have people believe us. And so if you give into that, you're letting the cult win. You are hurting anyone you love. And of course, you're hurting yourself. And we need good people around. We need people like you around. And you don't deserve to be hurt, not ever, not even by yourself or anyone inside. You deserve compassion and empathy, including treating yourself that way, but also receiving it. And so all programming is for the benefit of the cult. It hurts us. So it helps to give yourself off of opposite messages and to be able to fight back. So there is hope, there's healing, there's community. It doesn't mean that it's easy. Like I think I'll always be healing, but it can get so much better. And we can get safe. And we can be stay safe and stay safe.
It's such a hopeful message.
I'm glad.
Let's chat resources just a little bit.
Hmm.
So I'm curious about things like, I mean, absolutely, we'll be connecting people to your work, your website, your books,
Thank you.
all of the amazing things that you've done, your social media to make sure that people can find you really easily. In addition to that, do you have favorite books or tools or resources or communities that you like to recommend to folks?
Okay, yes. So for survivors, checking out Becoming Yourself by Alison Miller and also Safe Passage to Healing by Christine Oksana. Those are good books for survivors that go into detail about the cult torture, about mind control, and even about dissociative identity. And Alison Miller also has other books that she wrote that are just for therapists, but survivors can read them too.
Yes.
Healing the Unimaginable, Demystifying Mind Control and Ritual Abuse. So she provides a lot of knowledge in a really sensitive way, and it can help folks inside feel respected and even in control as they read, the way she talked about it. There were a few things I disagree with her on, but I might have been misinterpreting it. But it sounded like she was saying that she thought that most or all of the murder that happens is like theatrics. And I know, and other cult survivors know that it's not like it really happens. And then also there was a section on programming and in Becoming Yourself where it talked about puppets. And that had, for in my experience, there were never, but like every survivor is going to have some experiences that are similar and some that are different, but there were never puppets that were used in the programming. It was torture and repeated messages. But there is so much good in that book, in and in her books, so much detail that will really help survivors go, oh yeah, this happened to me, this happened to me, this happened to me. I'm not alone, but also help therapists understand. Websites. There's like survivorship.org, there's ra-info.org, there's ritualabuse.us. These are all sites that are run by cult torture survivors for cult torture survivors. There's like articles, there's news articles, there's links to conferences. Some of them have their own online communities. There is endritualabuse.org by psychologist Dr. Ellen Lachter. She also has like really helpful articles written by her and others. There is Grassroots RA /MC Collective for some more online survivor groups. And I link to all of them too on my site. And some of the articles I wrote.
There's some good stuff for folks to take advantage of. That's exciting. So as we wrap up, what's one thing that you would like every listener to take away from today's conversation?
That survivors can get safe and healing can happen. That's so important to hold on to. I think that mind control and cult-created folks inside can sound so scary, but it's not. You can work through it with compassion and empathy and repeatedly the cult lies and challenging them. But also, I can't just do one thing. Also, torture and mind control and cult-created insiders with the DID, it's very real. It is incredibly organized and calculated and deliberate, and it is far more common than most people want to admit or even realize. And there are so many overlapping experiences between cult torture survivors, even across countries, across the world. So we are not alone. If you're a cult torture survivor, you are not alone. And for therapists, if you are working with DID clients, you have already seen a cult torture survivor. You just may not know it. So it can really help to research it and believe survivors.
We can't thank you enough for doing this with us today. This has been such an honor and pleasure.
Oh, I'm so grateful you asked me. I love your podcast and I really appreciate our conversation.
Oh, thank you so much. And to everyone listening, whether you're a survivor, a clinician, or someone trying to understand more deeply, we're so glad that you're here. Before we close today, I just want to take a breath with all of you. It was a really big conversation today, and if you're noticing anything that's stirred up, let's just take a minute to center. Feel your feet on the floor, look around the room, orient back to where you are. Give yourself some space. And Cheryl, to you and your system, I cannot thank you enough for all of your courage, your clarity, and your incredible generosity. For everyone listening, you can find links to Cheryl's books, website, and recommended resources in the show notes. As always, you can find some additional support and writing that lives on our Substack and on healingmyparts.org, as well as some little nuggets of healing and truth on our Instagram account at Healing My Parts. So take really good care of yourselves this week. And until next time, let's keep healing. Thank you for tuning in. You can find our blog on Substack at healingmyparts.substack.com and on Instagram at healingmyparts. Just a disclaimer, any information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for professional therapy or behavioral health care, nor does listening to the podcast constitute a therapist-client relationship. Please be sure to take extra good care of you. And until next time, keep healing and thriving.